Thank you for coming out this evening. My name is Richard Fauss. I'm the audiovisual archivist for the West Virginia State Archives. And for the first order of business, I'm going to do our obligatory announcements, which are upcoming programs. We like this lecture series, both the Tuesday and Thursday night programs. We think it illustrates history that otherwise is not included in history books. So, upcoming in 2 days, on May 9th, 2013 at 6 o'clock p.m., our program is The Haunted History of the West Virginia Penitentiary, featuring Sherry Brake. And that ought to be, the penitentiary has been featured in a lot of these type ghost documentaries, and so this is another one. Coming up on June 4th, a program called Dixie's Daughters, United Daughters of the Confederacy and the Preservation of Confederate Culture. This is featuring Dr. Karen Cox. It is again June 4th at 6 o'clock p.m. right here in the Archives Library. And another program, if I missed something now, July 2nd, a look back at Rock Spring Park featuring Joe Kahn. This program is July 2nd, 2013 at 6 o'clock p.m. A look back at Rock Spring Park. And a river program, the Great Canal River and River Transportation in West Virginia, featuring Jerry Sutton, who is a really wonderful authority on all things river and steamboat. If you are interested in that sort of thing, that's August 6th, 2013, 6 o'clock p.m. right here in the library. The sports program featuring Dr. Bob Barnett, Hillside Fields, A History of Sports in West Virginia. He'll be talking about his new book on September 10th, 2013 at 6 o'clock p.m. And he has really used the archives a great deal in putting this book together. So that's our upcoming programs. We hope you'll try to make some of them as they would strike your interest. So now, it is my pleasure to start my introduction of our guest speaker this evening. Russ Barbour is currently a producer-director for West Virginia Public Broadcasting, whose credits include a number of documentaries, all of which concern West Virginia history and culture. Russ is a graduate of Southern West Virginia Community and Technical College and Marshall University, where he studied television production, broadcast journalism, religion, and history. In addition to producing the program we're talking about tonight, Reconstructing Bill, which incidentally won Best Documentary Feature at the 2009 West Virginia Filmmakers Festival, Russ has produced other documentaries which include West Virginians in War in 1994, a program on a West Virginia author, Breeze DJ Pancake, in 1989, which revised in 2002. He was also an independent producer for Ken Heckler in Pursuit of Justice, which was West Virginia Filmmakers' 2008 Film of the Year. This film was also shown on public broadcasting, but it was independently produced. Also a program, West Virginians Remember World War II, which won the 2008 Ohio Valley Regional Emmy Award. Upheaval, the story of the New River Gorge in 2009. The Winding Gulf, stories from West Virginia coalfields, which West considers a companion piece to Marland. And most recently, Three Rivers, the Bluestone Gully Nanu, March 2013, just recently out. In between times, Russ was primary editor for West Virginia Public Broadcasting's legislative coverage under various titles over the years. And he also produced many segments for West Virginia Public Broadcasting's magazines. Again, this was under various titles. Once it was called Statewide, once it was called West Virginia Journal, once it was called Outlook. Anyway, it was a magazine type format. In all of his productions, Russ has endeavored to include archival footage and photographs. In our program tonight, we'll talk about the history of producing Reconstructing Bill and the role of archival film footage in telling a historical story. For an archivist such as myself, this is important. Seeing items in a collection that you care for used to illustrate history in a documentary is a big deal to people like me. And so I'm always happy to see Russ come through the door.
I am? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I also need to make the point that Russ is considered by many of us at Archive, all of us really at Archives and History, as a good historian. Let me illustrate this point. Several years ago, we had decided to put a World War I piece, a World War I section display down in the museum. And a few of us in Archives got together and said, you know, it ought to have a West Virginia component to it. And so we put our heads together and we thought, what would illustrate West Virginia in the home front of World War I? And so we came a list of maybe 12 items. And I happened to think, well, Russ covered a lot of these items in West Virginians and War. Let's take a look at it. So we took a look at it, and I think Russ had 11 of those 12 items in his movie in that World War I segment. So we used it as part of the museum exhibit. And so, you know, Russ is an excellent researcher, he's a good writer, and this all helps him out. Russ and I met about 1985. I'd been on the job here about 2.5 years, and Russ was toting the camera for a guy named Russ McGuire, who was the talking, you know, the talent, the guy that stood up there with the microphone and interpreted what the legislature was doing. Smart guy. And in the course of it, Marland came up. And I said, well, I just found this piece on this archival film on Marland. Eventually we looked at it, and it was his farewell address in 1957 as he was leaving office, what Russ and I like to call his Sinews of Democracy speech, which you'll see why when we illustrate it. This will be the first clip. We're going to show a number of clips, and this will be the first clip we show. Eventually, Russ and we watched the film together, and it was absolutely riveting. I mean, it was like, we knew he was talking in 1957, but in the mid-'80s, he could have been talking about yesterday. He was talking about he was talking about the budget, saying that West Virginia going from a period of surplus to a period where the budget can only be balanced through use of an executive cutback, and then back to a period of surplus. To think, wow. Didn't this, wait, it seems like this just happened. Wait, it did just happen. So, you know, we got going, that really got us going, and we kept looking. We kept finding pieces, clues, different footage, different still photographs. Russ kept making contacts. And eventually, Russ wrote his first proposal in 1989, and the final documentary was final form was finally produced in 2009. It is at this point which I will happily conclude my opening remarks and introduce you to one of the outstanding documentary producers at West Virginia Public Broadcasting, and my friend, Russ Barbour.
Thank you everyone for coming out. First time I remember hearing about Bill Marland, I had a class with Paul Woods, who's in the documentary. He was my mentor at Southern West Virginia Community College. And he starts talking about this governor and telling us a little bit of the story. So I imagine this guy, he's skinny as a rail, he's in an alley somewhere, you know, the only thing he can do is drive a cab. Well, now of course I know that was his rehabilitation, that was his salvation. But then I came to work for public broadcasting. I got to know Jake, and we started down this road together, you know, where we'd find a piece, we'd find this one, that. But the film we're going to show you first, I think it's really the foundation. You know, it told us that there was a story here, and once we found that film, we found some others. And then the more we looked, the more film we found. And And so we have the story that exists today. You want to go ahead and run that?
Sure.
The past 4 years have definitely proven, beyond any question of a doubt, that our financial affairs depend exclusively upon the economic welfare of the various industries of our state. The financial pendulum of West Virginia has swung during the past 4 years from a period of surplus to a period when our budget could only become balanced by the use of an executive cutback, and then again to a surplus that we anticipate at the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, now this continues, and if you remember Governor Marland speaking, and there's a doorway here. You'll see a man, a young man, appear in the doorway with a camera, blinding his camera. That's Bill Kelly. Bill Kelly volunteers for the archives, and he got some of the back shots we'll show you at the conclusion of this. He wandered around the legislature and got some of the shots. Bill said his philosophy was always, and Russ's I think too, that he should show you things you could not see even if you attended. You know, different angles, different views, different things. So this is about education.
Any mention of education would be incomplete without mentioning one of the major aspects of education in West Virginia during the past 4 years, namely the integration and desegregation of our public school system. As you know, early in this administration, the Supreme Court of the United States rendered a decision which did away with our segregated school program as we have known it for so many years. Immediately, we took the position that the Supreme Court's ruling was the law of the land, and that as such we should obey it in both spirit and word. To this end we have worked, and I am glad to say that those who have studied the segregation and integration program of the public schools of the nation have been loud in their praise of West Virginia's efforts in this field. Such a change in our school administration poses not only economic, but sociological and political problems. I am glad to say that all of these problems have been met with a minimum of friction, and as of today, due to the efforts of our county boards of education, our state department of education, our board of education, we are well on the way to having a school system in accord with the Constitution of the United States as interpreted by our Supreme Court. I take this opportunity to express my congratulations to our school officials, our county boards of education, our state department of education, our state board of education, and our Bureau of Negro Welfare and other interested citizens who have handled this problem with a minimum of difficulty.
Again, this is one of the passages that really got our attention. You know, this is just like amazing. Very few states looked at it that way. What do we have coming next?
It happens that Bill Kelly went on to manage Wise Kanawha Valley Studio. I was one of his employees. I wish I'd known what a great guy, what a contribution he had made in West Virginia before I came to work for him. I might have respected him a little more.
I'm mindful of the fact that oftentimes the reorganization will increase the efficiency of any organization, public or private. In fact, we've carried out several during the past 4 years, as I have previously mentioned. But in my opinion, thinking that contrives to hide behind reorganization plans rather than face basic problems of finance is to be deplored. I reiterate that I do not attempt in any way to suggest policy, but I cannot leave 4 years of grappling with these problems without stating my own views concerning them. At the risk of being trite, I say to the people of West Virginia, it has been a great honor to have had the opportunity to administer your affairs of government over these last 4 years. It has been both fascinating thank you for your efforts on behalf of our people. While I well remember that we have had differences of opinion on solutions to our problems, I am also firmly convinced that it is in the discussions, debates, and arguments over these differences that the sinews of democracy are strengthened and the solutions to our problems eventually brought forth in a democratic manner. For you of the 53rd Legislature and for the incoming administration, may I wish every success for the common good of West Virginia. Good luck. God bless you.
My favorite moment, I think, is when the lady gives that smirk. You know, right when he's saying he knows they've had their differences. This is one of the kinder moments for Marland doing film. One of my favorite is when he basically says to the legislature, I'm just here to help you to make up for the screw-up you had 2 years ago.
But these are Bill Kelly's cutaways. That's Nyla Olin running the sound camera and taught Bill a lot. But you see, you got many different angles. Sorry, go ahead, Russ.
The film, one of the things I love about this production, and a lot of the others, but I think this is a really good example of it, is that it's almost like we put Bill Marland on trial again, as he was before the public in his time. But we have evidence. Here's his wife. She's very attentive. She's not just listening politely. And there are all these pieces of film that give us another piece of Bill Marland, the man, the executive. And we were able to bring all this together in a way that all the various items, they don't work the same independently. And we have photographs, we have microfiche, we have newspaper clippings, and a variety of media that together, I think they help save it. You know, they help bring out the real man that is there, for better or worse. At the time, you could only serve 4 years consecutive by law. That changed with Archivist. But at the time, you could only serve 4. Right. He tried for the Senate a couple of times, but was not elected. We have with us Arden Curry, who worked for Governor Marland when he was governor, and then went into law practice. And thank you, sir. Thank you. If it weren't for people like Arden Curry, Carl Lilly, and all the other people you see here in this story, we wouldn't have a story. And I'm very grateful for that. You know, all the elements, they come together in such a way with the people, that it brought us all to this moment. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful for all the people who helped make this kind of work possible. You know, it's easier to go home and feel like you did something worthwhile. I think sometimes I'm a state employee. Most West Virginians would probably not earmark their tax dollars to go to my salary. So I owe it to the public, to the people of West Virginia, to give them their money. You know, to give something that lasts a day. And I think Dick and I are able to do that through your contributions, whether intended or not. Yes, sir.
A couple things about that real quick.
Yes, sir.
Now, who would have done that? Who would have filmed that?
Oh, that's WCHS film in this case.
And my second question is, was it broadcast? Was it broadcast live on when that?
Not live. That part of it is.
I think maybe WSAZ might have broadcast it live, but we don't have that.
Okay.
But with this was broadcast, they had to shoot the film, take it over to the studio, process it, which they had a processor over, well, it's over there, and process it, and then, you know, and then edit it a little bit and put it on the air. And it probably did it at maybe 6 o'clock or maybe some other time, special time. It probably did it that day.
Okay.
But, yeah, they had Nilo Olin, who you saw in the back of his head, he really knew what he was doing. He was a World War II combat photographer, was trained, and he came back, and Bill was just like a sponge. I mean, everything that he was just ready to absorb everything Nilo taught him, and he learned very, very well. But Nilo was a real professional, figured out how to get pictures with film in the old in the Capitol, and it's not very bright. I mean, the lighting in the Capitol is not very bright. You had to know what you were doing to get a good image. And so there was a lot that went into it back then. Now, video cameras, they don't care if it's, the Capitol has plenty of light for modern video cameras. It's not a problem. Then there was something, there was more to it.
What year was that speech?
1957. Yeah, just right before Governor Underwood took over.
There is later on, when W.W. Barron, I think it was his first State of the Stage, that there's a kinescope where they actually filmed the TV while that one was being broadcast live. And that might have been the first, or one of the first live presentations. Now we've got the start of the...
Right. What you're going to see tonight is yesterday we met and we selected the beginning, the middle, and the end of the actual Marland documentary, but in some cases you're going to see like the raw footage and then what Russ did with that and other footage to put it together into the package. So we're going to start 3 segments now, and this is the beginning of the documentary.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Want a specific reason why I don't want to go to the home to follow? Do you have one for it? I think there are other endeavors that suit my talents a little better.
The 24th Governor of West Virginia, William Casey Marland. Most former governors have managed to work their way into private business in an executive capacity. Marland worked his way into a job as a taxi driver in Chicago.
Governor, you sound like you didn't like all of this in the first place. So, I wouldn't use such strong language. I didn't like politics. I enjoyed it very much. But that too is fantasy.
Marland's administration in the mid-50s was marked by the usual number of ups and downs, arguments with the press, political differences.
Bill Marland was not a good politician. He was more the big idea CEO type. Here's the plan, you make it work. I've done all the hard work for you. Well, it doesn't work in politics.
At age 34, William Casey Marland entered the governor's office, the youngest chief executive in West Virginia's 90-year history. A half-century later, Marland is ranked among the state's most brilliant minds and visionary governors.
He felt that when you went and became a servant of the people, that's really what you were supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be doing things that would make their lives better.
Governor William C. Marland, nonetheless, is often remembered as a failed politician, a stubborn maverick who couldn't take the political heat, an alcoholic who wound up a cabbie on the cold streets of Chicago. A more complete image emerges through recently discovered news film, home movies, and other archival recordings. Enhanced by recent personal accounts, the truth and inspiration of one man's story gains new perspective, a story of success, failure, redemption, and validation. The story of Governor William Casey Marland.
He was a fairly heroic figure in spite of all his difficulty and fighting and flaws and failure. He's sort of one of my heroes.
This forward-looking university offers courses patterned to keep pace with West Virginia's progress, such as oil and gas engineering, mining, agriculture, law, and medicine.
Bill Marland's future in politics began taking shape in the 1940s. As a law student at West Virginia University, Marland astounded faculty and classmates alike with his quick mind and photographic memory. General Charles Fauss oversaw the State National Guard during Marland's 4 years as governor. In May 2000, Fauss recalled 2 officers who had roomed with Marland in college.
They said he'll sit there over there, half asleep. If we asked him a question about a lecture, he'd quote it just like it had been recorded. His mind was absolutely perfect.
After graduating at the top of his class in 1947, Marland received an appointment as clerk for Southern West Virginia's U.S. District Court. Federal Judge Ben Moore, impressed with his new law clerk, later wrote that Marland possessed the finest mind in West Virginia. With Homer Hanna, an influential member of the state Democratic Party, serving as Moore's head clerk, Marland rose from clerk to Attorney General of West Virginia in less than 2 years. Then, in 1952, the Democratic Party faced charges of State House corruption.
On behalf of the people of West Virginia,
To continue the party's 20-year reign in the governor's office, begun when Republican William Conway was succeeded by Herman Kump in 1933, the Democrats required a respectable gubernatorial candidate with a clean slate. Amid a field of prominent old-school candidates, youthful Attorney General William C. Marland seemed ideal. Former Governor and sitting U.S. Senator Matthew Neely joined current Governor Okie Pattison in ardently supporting candidate Marland. After claiming his party's nomination, Bill Marland defeated Republican challenger Rush Holt, formerly a U.S. Senator and member of the Democratic Party.
The State House machine thought, well, let him be governor, but we'll call the shots. And they didn't know Bill Marland.
One thing I'd like to say at this point, in the next section you're going to see more from his family. We have to thank Carl Bowie and the late Doug Perry. We were shooting the interview with Jim Hott. After the interview, he told us who the people were that we knew because of. And these guys, they knew the family. They had worked with the family for the book Reopening Lynn Rogers. And they told the family they could trust me. You know, they didn't know me. Carl's known me for years, but not all that well to that point. And the family, I think they were at a point where they felt like it's time to get on the fly and let's deal with this. And they agreed that among themselves to meet in Illinois at Grace Beck's home. She's the governor's older sister. And so they all came together just for this. To finally, for years they basically ignored the press, the entire. No, Alan did not know that.
No, he was the baby, I think, in the picture, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was,
Right, that's right.
Yeah, the oldest boy was the baby.
But if it weren't for those interviews, the film is great. All the media we have, that's great. But we wouldn't have had this documentary. In fact, I thought about bringing it, but I'm so embarrassed by it. I did. For West Virginia Journal, I had done a 2-part story on Governor Marland. It was before we talked to the family, before we found a lot of the film that shows up here. And it presents a smarmy governor. It presents a very one-sided view. I'm so thankful we had the opportunity to redeem ourselves, so to speak, and to tell the real story. And you'll see that in this next sequence, I think, the impact that they make on this document.
Bill Marland first met Valerie Allen while visiting family in Lincoln, Illinois. After sharing a dance, the two found they had much in common. They married in 1942.
He and my mother would talk interminably about every subject you could possibly think of. And I think that's really what got them together. They were both interested in what the other one had to say.
Besides chatting and dancing to the music of the swing era, Bill and Valerie Marland enjoyed opera, Shakespeare, and fishing. On their Dutch Ridge farm, some 20 miles from the state capital, the Marland family raised hens, hogs, and sold apples.
People would drive up and buy the bushels of apples and mention things like, you look just like the governor, to my father. And he used to get a kick out of that. Yeah, a lot of people tell me that. Because no one, of course, would have believed that the governor of the state of West Virginia was on the side of the road selling apples with his kids.
Decades later, Butch Anglin purchased the Dutch Ridge property and came to share Bill Marland's appreciation for it.
He said that this was his spiritual home, and I believe it's just because of the beautiful view of the mountains and the peace and the quiet out here. You don't hear anything except maybe a plane every once in a while go over, and it's just very tranquil to sit here, hear nothing.
Governor Marland seemed as content in the sky as he was in his apple orchard.
It was pretty common knowledge that Edsel France, the state pilot, taught him to fly. And quite often, once they get in the air, Marland would say, "Let me have the controls."
He soloed the plane. There was talk while he was governor, they didn't want him flying because of the attendant danger of flying in West Virginia.
In the air, Edsel France's instructions sometimes took a back seat to Bill Marland's photographic memory.
He said, well, now Bill, you need to study up on this. Here's a book on this from the FAA, whatever. And he just kind of thumbed through it, and he finally said, okay, I'm ready to take over the controls.
Casey Marland, a pilot himself, came to believe that the straightforward thinking required to fly an aircraft helped his father cope with the stress of governing.
There's still stress, but it's a very different kind of stress. If you know the rules and you know how to utilize them, you just end up, doing a good job and pat yourself. It's not the murky world of human interaction and politics.
Well, I well remember that we have had differences of opinion on solutions to our problems. I am also firmly convinced that it is in the discussions, debates, and arguments over these differences that the sinews of democracy are strengthened and the solutions to our problems eventually brought forth in a democratic manner.
Marland later shared how regret over past mistakes and the impact of his alcohol abuse upon his family increased his dependency on liquor.
It's not out here that we tear ourselves up trying to go back, or if I hadn't done this, or if I hadn't done that, and if I hadn't did this, etc., etc. Until finally we decide that there's only one way to solve this problem, and that is walk into the nearest door and have some ice and soda and fix it and put it.
As a last resort, Bill Marland sought treatment in the detox ward at the South Elgin Mental Hospital.
They gave him one shot that he said was so hot he thought he was going to burn up. And that's all they did. He said, I don't know what that shot was, but he said it worked.
Before long, the former chief executive became a devout member of Alcoholics Anonymous and re-entered the workforce. He tried jobs involving travel and practicing law. Then in 1962, displeased with his performance, Marland shifted to an entirely different route. He got behind the wheel of a Chicago cab.
He figured that was as far removed from anything he'd ever done before, and that's what he needed. And he also knew that it would give him time to reflect, time to think about the future, time to get his act together, so to speak.
He said it gave him a semblance of order and structure, and he said he really enjoyed driving a taxi cab.
Bill Marland took pleasure in recounting how a passenger from West Virginia responded when he recognized the cabbie's name.
He said, that's a coincidence. He said, William C. Marland. He said, that's the name of the best damn governor in West Virginia.
I think you can see how Russ puts together a lot of the different elements. We're going to continue to show you parts and pieces. I have to bring up here that sometimes you don't get everything you want when you're doing this. One thing we would have liked to had, and Russ actually knew where it was, is period shots. You probably noticed the shots in Chicago were modern shots. It would have been nicer to have had shots from 1964 or something of Chicago, black and white with a few flash cabs in it. You got the flash cabs all right, you know, but it cost a little more money than was in Russ's budget, so we weren't able to use that, and it's kind of unfortunate. But still, it worked. What Russ did work. It's just, I guess that's the only point, is sometimes, as hard as you try, you can't find everything you want.
We often work on a shoot screen budget. So it's really, it's the people, you know, it's who you meet along the way. It's the state archives, it's collections here and there. It's just people finding stuff and saying, hey, I found this. That brings it all together. If we had to pay for every shred of film that we have, we could not afford to do this. We're blessed to live in a state where West Virginians are proud of our history, our past, and we're clean. You know, we hang on to things.
But these are the home movies, and I'll let Russ talk about some of these.
Well, they're amazing. This is probably either the governor or his wife shooting. They were excellent cinematographers. They knew how to use a camera. It's as if they said, you know, someone's going to show you want to document our lives today. Let's shoot this so they have something to use. Not everybody shoots like this. Even professionals don't always shoot like that. But as you can see, it's just stunning film that really captures their lives and parts of their lives that we need to capture. You know, we can show the news film all day, we can show photographs, but this, as I said earlier, it validates the facts. You know, it says that yes, she did love her husband, she did love going out fishing. You know, it wasn't something they put in the press release. But, and that's, I think, one of the key things about Governor Marland. When he came to office, news film was just taking off in West Virginia. Lawmakers, politicians, they didn't really know how to play to the camera. They didn't know how to do any of that. And I think in the governor's case, he really didn't care. So you see the real man. You see the real man looking at the camera, being annoyed, wanting the cinematographer to get out of space. But you see him enjoying the life.
Getting these home movies was a really good thing. I mean, that shows a level of trust Russ was able to get out of the family. And that goes back to the introduction he got to the family. And we were able to transfer them and Russ was able to make use of them. Kodak film from the period, Kodak color is pretty spectacular. It usually holds its color pretty well. These are just some random trips, but I hope you find it somewhat interesting to see the raw footage and then how Russ used it, how he put it to use in the documentary in some instances.
It was so nice to have more than we could possibly use.
You will see some scenes that aren't aren't and the documentary is still available, by the way, through public broadcasting. I think we probably have plans to put it on YouTube, on the Archives YouTube channel shortly, because we realized, or Russ commented on this a couple of times, but not to the audience, we haven't, that some of the press was under the impression, maybe you were too, that we're going to show the documentary rather than talk about the documentary. So if anybody was under that impression, we apologize. And the best thing we can do to correct it is to put it up on YouTube, let you see the whole thing. There's a story goes with this, Russ is going to tell you.
So the story went, John, there's John right there. One year he wanted to fire him. He really wanted to fire him for Christmas. Well, he didn't bother to tell anybody until Christmas Eve.
Because Santa knew everything.
Yeah, Santa knew everything. So his mother's getting ready to put him in bed and says it would really be great to get that fire engine in the morning. She panicked. And I like how it goes in the documentary that John and Susan tell the story. That essentially she goes running out of the room to the governor and tells him that they've got to get a fire engine. So he goes to the Diamond department store, which is, I think they were closed by that time. They get hold, you know the story, Mr. Gurry. They get a hold of someone from the department store, and they open up the department store at like 9 o'clock at night, and they let the governor come in, and he purchases that fire engine, and there it is the next morning. I think it's coming up here. But those kinds of stories, they help make this complete. But there's one of the important things I think to all of us is timing. Grace is gone. She's died. Susan, the governor's daughter, is died. The man who tells the story about the fire engine, Grace's husband, he's gone. We pretty much got it at just the right time, except of course we would have worked with Valerie, his wife who died in the fire accident in the 70s. There's sound on film somewhere in the universe. We've not been able to find. Sometimes you'll find a listing in a card catalog of scripts at an archive, and it just really baits you. You're really wanting that footage, and then you can't find it. Sometimes, and this happened a lot with the Marland documentary, there was nothing, there were no cards, no script, but just going through a piece of a real film and coming on the film.
Or even, Russ is pretty good, even more obscure people like Homer Hanna. Now, there's not a lot of film of him, but Russ was able to find a good clip of it, a good scene, and say, oh, that's who that is, or get somebody to tell them who it was, and then use that. This is extraordinary film here, Okie Pattison, very little film of Okie, Governor Pattison and his wife. This is some kind of a dinner, maybe a state dinner they held, and it just shows unusual scenes in the governor's mansion and dinner, and a lot of people have a hard time finding footage of it.
Susan talks about the life of a princess that she had. She felt like a princess growing up in the governor's mansion. And there are shots right in this section that show her being that princess, you know, and how just thrilled she was to be a part of it. She also talks at one point about this very nice lady who would come to the governor's mansion and stay from time to time. And she wiped her teeth out and looked at nice lady. Nice ladies would be nice. But the nice lady was Eleanor Roosevelt. See, there she is, being the princess.
There's, let's see, there's, I'm having trouble coming up with state superintendent of free schools.
Trent?
Trent, W.W. Trent. He's coming up here. Trent, Edgar B. Sims, there's a band after the dinner, folks in the line, and don't get much film of them either. They should be coming up now, very shortly. Governor Patterson being ill as he was. Patterson's wife, Ms. Patterson and Marland. Some of these folks, I apologize, I don't know. W.W. Trent, Edgar B. Sims and his wife. I would say a few of these folks I know.
There are also movies from Governor Underwood's time as governor and before. But I think these are probably the first home movies that we have of the governor of West Virginia.
And this is...
And that's his father.
Right.
It looks like a man who could run the full operation of them.
I mean, there's things like this. What kid in the 50s, as folks didn't have a home movie camera, didn't have scenes like this taken up?
John talks about how spoiled he was, too.
But he's, this is so typical. Now here, like I say, moving images of Governor Patterson are very rare. It shows how he was a very well-liked governor, and it sort of shows a lot of his personality, I think.
Any questions?
So how many children were there, and what ages were they in terms of
3 boys and a girl. Alan was the oldest. He was somewhere around 10, I think, when the governor came to office. Yes, sir.
Did his wife stay with him
Yes,
throughout all this difficulties?
I think they were very much in love all the way until she died, or he died. And you see that in the images. She didn't think, there's a story that Paulus tells that he was afraid that he was becoming an alcoholic. And his wife says, "Oh, Bill, you're too smart." So I think if they knew of it, they would deny. Yes, sir.
Yes, why Chicago and not some other city?
It happens when he was governor. He ran for the Senate. He didn't get it. And he ran for the open office of the senator who had just died. 2 years later, the same thing happens. The other senator from West Virginia dies, and he dies for that office. Meanwhile, he had, with Mr. Curry, started a law practice, and as Mr. Curry says in the documentary, the clientele he was going after did not want to do business with him because they were associated with coal industry. So he got the job with a coal company that was essentially run by union people. Is that right, Mr. Curry?
The company was owned by the United Mine Workers, and Governor Marland was a good friend of John L. Lewis. And Mr. Lewis talked him into taking a job as a public relation person for that mine out in, I believe it was in East St. Louis. And of course, being a PR man, that's when he really got into the alcohol. When he was here as governor, and when he and I were practicing law together, I can honestly say, and I've said it before, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I never saw Bill Marland take a drink. There was never any alcohol in the governor's office. In the evening, of course he did, and I had drinks with him in the evening at the mansion. And when he got with the TR job, when we practiced law together, he had a retainer from the United Mine Workers, which gave him a fair income. Didn't help me much, but he didn't share his retainer, but we had a good time trying to practice law and did all right. But when he, an interesting story, when he came out and exposed himself, he was driving the cab, and he asked the passenger in the cab where he was from, and the passenger said, West Virginia. And Governor Marland said, really? He said, I used to be the governor of West Virginia. And then after that's when it came out that he was driving the cab. But a follow-up to that after he came out, and it was pretty well known that he was driving the cab, and he wasn't driving the cab drinking then, because that's a no-no. So one day, while he was governor, Jim Edwards, who owned and operated Huntington Mattress Company, wanted to be a member of the West Virginia State Racing Commission. He wanted to be one in the worst way. And finally he prevailed, along with some push from his friends, to get Governor Marland to make him a member of the Racing Commission, which he did. And when it came out that he was driving the cab in D.C., Mr. Edwards, in case you don't know who he was, he operated the Huntington Mattress Company, and it's his wife that's given all that money to Marshall University now.
Edwards football stadium.
After that came out, Jim Edwards called me and wanted to know if I could get in touch with the governor. He wanted to talk to him. And so I got the telephone number for him. And Jim Edwards called him and told him to come on back home. He had a job for him. Said, you're not going to drive a cab anymore. Come back home, I have a job for you. And he made him an officer in the mattress company. And Bill Marland came back here and was well received. I can remember some affairs down at the Civic Center that he attended, and when he was recognized, the crowd took him in, and he was very happy about that. And not long after that, it was discovered he had cancer and he died. He operated an apple orchard out on Dutch Ridge. I don't know whether this is in the film. If it is, I won't talk about it.
Dutch Ridge, big Dutch Ridge.
He loved that apple orchard, and he wanted his remains, his ashes. He was cremated. He wanted his ashes spread out over the apple orchard. He loved to try to farm, and he got into the business of raising rock Cornish game hens. And he had a chicken operation here in Charleston that cleaned and packaged his rock Cornish hens. He stored them over in the North Charleston ice plant, I think it was called. And he'd send me over there real often to get Cornish hens. And when I got them for him, I helped myself too. But I always told him. We had a very good relationship. He was a very smart man. He understood, but by the same token, he was misunderstood. And some of the things that got him in trouble was when he wanted to put a severance tax on coal, oil, gas, and sand. And there were two powerful members of the West Virginia State Senate that didn't want that to happen. And that was one of his big downfalls. Along with giving his brother a job giving his father a whiskey account. Now, who wouldn't help their dad and their brother get a job? But he got criticized very hard for that. But it didn't change his mind. He accepted criticism and accepted the fact that people would criticize him. We had a lot of talks about that. But I enjoyed working with him. He was a very smart man. He was way ahead of the curve, I tell you.
Charles?
Some people don't know that he played football for the University of Alabama.
My dad went to high school with Marland. He said school plays, Marland would memorize the entire script, and they would forget their lines or whatever. He would give them the side right on the spot. He knew everybody's lines for every play they ever did. They were pretty significant plays too. And also the UNW angle was brought up all ago. He was a member of the United Mine Workers.
Yes,
He was a card-carrying member of the United Mine Workers. Worked in the mines.
Yeah, I gathered he wasn't. He didn't just know John Lewis. They were really close friends.
They were friends.
Oh, yeah.
But that you remember, he came to his inaugural. John L. Lewis was a guest.
He announced, as I recall, he announced his initial announcement running for governor in the UNW headquarters, local headquarters. And it was a pretty wise PR move at that time, but
Dick?
We can if we just questions.
Yes.
As I recall, during the Senate run, because of him desegregating the schools and because of the tax on natural resources, he basically had no money. I remember every primary road, every rock along every primary road had Marland U.S. Senate stenciled on it in white paint.
Is that there's still
That was basically his campaign.
Yeah, there's still cars driving by and you see it there. Dick?
I had planned that we might show some footage that would illustrate some of the other things Russ does in films. That seemed better when we were thinking of it, but we'll go ahead and show it anyway. Basically, Russ, one of his techniques is to go after natural sound. I mean, it is getting a little far afield, but there is a film called Charleston Beautiful on the Kanawha, and if you listen to a lot of the sound, some of the sound films, you'll hear things, I should say, that are useful. And so we'll take a little detour.
Most of the films that we find the sound. So this is great.
Auto horns. Streetcar sounds.
And here we are on Charleston Street at the intersection of Tennessee Avenue. The moment we look down Tennessee Avenue.
You'll not see any of this in the documentary, but you'll hear it.
Looking down Charleston Street toward the west end of the city. Glimpses of Charleston at worship.
I'm always fascinated with the West Virginia State Archives because there exists this collection of incredible films. I don't know too many places that have collections like this. And it's not all this, it's everything. It's Americana. There was footage waiting for the decision and evaluation period. There's one thing in a lot of those places. You'll see in the documentary there's a lot of coal mining that dates back to the 1920s and captures a sense of the life of the mines there. And I think it's all important, the sound and the images and all these elements tell us where they don't understand.
3 horns in this one.
And this is I think this was Dick's idea. There were those aspects we didn't have any images for, or we just wanted to give, the depth. And the political cartoons, they're fantastic. The key though is you have to find ones and shoot them in such a way that tell the story without you having to explain.
This particular one, you'll see it's a Kendall Ventru. He was a local political cartoonist, and this is what Russ. I mean, anybody can shoot the whole thing, but Russ breaks it up and figures out ways. Okay, show that. But this is some of the raw camera work that Russ did on this. I guess you call it moves.
Right, we tried to make different moves and get as much out of a given cartoon as we could.
Now you see the Kendall Ventru is very talented. John L. Lewis, you can see. He had a stock drawing of the legislature there, but is an older style. He was. The papers were brutal. They said it however they saw it. And I think it adds some depth to the telling of the story. We talked about this on the live, but I try to be honest with the story. I was born and raised in West Virginia, and I have no desire to be down in West Virginia. We do try to be honest. These stories. I think certainly in Governor Marland's story, you can see pride for West Virginia. They genuinely care about the people. And I think our audience, it seems like once they saw this story, they had wanted to be able to embrace it. Here's a virtual gallery of every political person. Neely, Kilgore, Cleve Bailey, young Harlan Staggers, Elizabeth Key, Paula Hand, Senator or Congressman Byrd, probably at that time. And that's the and then sort of the we didn't talk about this, but Marland had a significant industrial campaign to try and lure new industries to West Virginia. It was reasonably successful.
And that is in the documentary. There's all this footage. There's footage of him out of state in New England, subbing for West Virginia. This is in essence where a lot of those shows, like the Jack Carr show, they were live, and if they were recorded, they were often as kinescopes. And those kinescopes, not all of them were kept. So there are a lot of films like that. You just can't find the
or in the early days of videotape, it might have been taped, and the trouble with videotape is when they first started to use it, it was very expensive, and they tended to reuse it. So just because it was originally taped doesn't mean it was saved. And let's see, what else do we have? I think odds and ends. We've got the story to go with this. This has nothing to do with anything except we're on a research trip to Washington.
It illustrates the fact that documenting stories can be in the future.
So we're in Washington, and with Will James, and Will James said, "There's Bill," and I'm thinking, "Bill who?" And so we're in this old state van, this battered white state van, and West Virginia State car on the front. Will makes a U-turn on Pennsylvania Avenue, floors the van, blasts past the motorcade. We end up at the Capitol. Russ and Will are breaking out the camera, and I'm trying not to do anything suspicious with my hands. And they get the president jogging by. And I used to joke that we probably know never any closure to being blown away in all our lives.
You might notice he looks kind of wary when he's coming by. We found out after that at the time, the press corps in the White House would come to an agreement. They would leave him alone when he's jogging. And in return, they would get a good photo of him. And of course, we let
But I mean, we were supposed to take a better van, but the air conditioning was broken, so we ended up with the old van that had nothing on it, no West Virginia public broadcasting, no nothing.
It is an adventure. I often think about the fact that I have a really great job. We get to travel to a lot of interesting places and meet a lot of interesting people. And this story, the family said something. His daughter-in-law, when they saw the documentary, she said that there was some sense among the family where justice is. And yet, what more can you ask? You know? They didn't know what we were going to do to them. They didn't know how we were going to kill their relative. And they were okay with it. Thank you for that. And that's what we're here for, isn't it? To tell West Virginia's stories, to tell them honestly, and to tell them with some measure of kindness.
Sure. And these are just the closing credits. This is how the documentary ends, so you'll see a whole lot of people that helped. And like I said, we will put this documentary up on the Archives YouTube channel.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
It's a PBS standard of 56 minutes, 46 seconds.
And it's already been on TV?
Yes.
So why don't they just show it?
In fact, they did in March, another documentary that I worked on, Three Rivers, aired, and they also aired the same night, I think, the documentary.
It's going to be on YouTube. So archive is YouTube.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Not a question, but Bill Marland was almost solely responsible for the aluminum plant moving in to the Parkersburg area. During his administration, he worked, trying to get industry into the state of West Virginia. And when that plant finally decided we're going to move there, that was one of his starring moments in his life, I do believe. And he would go through the governor's office saying, "E pluribus aluminum." He was so happy and proud of the fact that
Roswell. And you see, it was a really big deal. It was really big. Anyone else? Yes.
Hey, Russ, could you talk a little bit about the school integration thing? Because I think it's really fascinating how quickly it took place.
I think
a lot of folks don't realize that,
right.
how quickly that took place.
As we said before, and as he says in the film, he deemed that it was the law of the land, and that was it. It wasn't all pretty, though. In Patoka, there's dramatic film, also shot by Bill Keller. Some African-American boys are getting off of the school bus to go into a white school, and they just get punished. These boys are just beaten up on them. And the adults are standing there looking at them like the stars of night. And in some cases it was gradual. I think Knob pretty much right off the bat went with integration. But there was a phasing, so to speak. But nevertheless, it did happen pretty quickly. That West Virginia served as an example. And when Governor Marland was interviewed in 1965 by his cabinet, that was brought up. They were saying, well, Governor, what advice do you have for other governors in dealing with segregation? He said, oh, no, you don't want to hear what an old coal miner has to say. What, who's this? What an old coal miner has to say. Not just an old coal miner. Here's that in front of me.
When did he die?
He died in 1965. He was discovered in March, and he died the day after Thanksgiving.
Oh.
Pancreatic cancer. His family, they have fond memories of it, so to speak. They spent Thanksgiving with him. They had a good Thanksgiving. But even as of that day, he was saying, I'm gonna kick this through. I'm gonna make it. And then he died. There's some film of him at his daughter's wedding, which was in September, I think. And if you didn't know, you would just assume he had always been a slim individual. He looked healthy, but he was much smaller than he had been. Anyone else? Yes,
when did they put the severance tax on coal? You know?
Well, that was under Governor Moore, wasn't it?
More?
85?
That was Governor Barber, he was Senate then. I was trying to think, I can't remember the date back when I should be doing right now.
Before that.
Yes, ma'am.
And his alcoholism, was he abusive with his family? Was he a mean drunk?
I gather he was hard on Alan. I don't think he physically, I don't know that he physically abused him, but I think he was verbally tough with his son. I think John and his daughter did very well by their father. But was he an angry drunk? I would say he most likely was. She drank, but I don't know that she was. I don't know. I think they were both. Sometimes I think that the governor was socially awkward, but they were social people. They liked to go out and have a good time. And as Mr. Curry said, they would have drinks in the evening. Yes, ma'am?
My husband and I took Valerie to dinner in Chicago after Bill died, and she was careful about drinking. She really couldn't drink. She, I think, probably had a problem or two. She was teaching school.
Right.
And that's where she was from.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to tell you a story of recent vintage. I mean, I heard it fairly recently, which is that we were at Watoga several years ago, and I guess I ran into somebody who had worked there for quite a while, because this person told a story of a woman who came to stay at Watoga, and one evening, there was a lot of noise out on the lake because there were two men and you've heard this.
Yes.
And she said, why can't you do something about that, and so on and so forth. He said, I can't do anything about it. She said, I'm going to contact the governor about it. And he said, ma'am, that is the governor.
And there's film in the documentary of Marland and his family at the There's one shot he's standing in, he's in a t-shirt, he's just standing there and talking to some guys just like their fellow good old boys. Observations?
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.